Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, January 9th, and had a nice weekend here in Arizona. Although here in the valley in Phoenix, I live in a suburb of Mesa outside of Phoenix, Arizona. We had a hard freeze the last 2 nights, and I've been working really hard on a fall and winter garden. And whew, even though I covered everything, it did a lot of damage to my crops. So I'm pretty disappointed. I think my tomatoes are wiped out, even though they were covered nicely. My zucchini plants, they didn't like this too well. But my broccoli and cauliflower and carrots and radishes and bell peppers, they all stood up to it. So, and celery. Green beans are kind of questionable, so I may have to be out there replanting in a few weeks when it starts getting a little warmer, because we're getting down into the 30s at night, which is crazy. But the night before last, it was at 27 degrees here. That is insane. And as I was out covering my plants that day, the day before yesterday, it actually started snowing. And that was at about 5:30 in the afternoon. So it's been a little crazy weather around here. You know, this global warming and stuff, damaging all this, hard work. Anyway, I am so happy that this week has arrived. Tomorrow is a very big day. It starts the impeachment inquiry with Mayorkas. And of course, every Angel family is thrilled with this news, because as we watch in horror with the open borders and the amount of people and the criminals and, all the stories I've been telling you about, that Venezuelan gang members that are coming, the president there in Venezuela emptied the prisons of this gang and just basically said, go to America. And they are slowly making their way up, through South America and up through Mexico. And the mayhem, the destruction, the murders, the killings, what they're leaving in their path is unbelievable. The things that I'm reading, it's just crazy. So I wanted to just start this off. I'm going to go through a lot of Mayorkas' history. I'll be reading a lot today because I can't retain all of this, but just so that you all know what this man is about. And one very interesting thing that I read about, so Florida U.S. congressional woman Kat Cammack was talking to Harris Faulkner on Fox News and relayed to her that they had Mayorkas in a closed-door meeting and were letting him know that they were going to start an impeachment inquiry. And he said, you're not going to like who comes next. And she said to him, is that a threat? And he just sat there and smiled at her, that evil, disgusting smile that he has, this known liar, this known treasonous pig is really what I call him. Not only because of what he's doing to the United States and his dereliction of duty and breaking his oath that he took, but what he is helping to facilitate on the other side of this, the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the just the way that they're robbing people blind of their resources to get here. And I was just reading another article this morning where these men in Turkey, they're actually using social media to, Turkish smugglers use social media to help citizens of every country reach the U.S. border. So they do advertisements and from Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The advertisements offer arrangements for travel, visas, and transportation directly to the U.S.-Mexican border. So one smuggling advertisement shared on Telegram boasts a guaranteed pass for $10,000, which includes a flight from Istanbul to Cancun, a Mexican visa, Cancun entrance, a hotel room, a taxi, and delivery to Tijuana border. We have a road for citizens of every country who cannot get a Mexico visa and fly to Nicaragua. Guaranteed pass. E-visa, here's another packet. E-visa Cancun entrance, hotel, taxi, Cancun, Tijuana flight ticket, delivery to Tijuana border, $6,500. Sponsor price, $1,000. They have phone numbers. They have there are discounts for bulk arrivals. We have a way to Canada. I mean, it's just insane what's happening on social media, and that these platforms are not shutting this down, because that's basically human smuggling. When you're getting paid to do something like that, that's human smuggling, and those people should be shut down. So this is the other side of what Mayorkas is doing, beyond what's happening to American citizens and to the sovereignty of our country. You've got a man who is facilitating this and allowing these people to be smuggled, allowing this type of transaction to happen. It's enriching the cartel on a weekly basis. I think they were saying it was like $32 million in a week is what they're making. Look, folks, the amount of arms and ammunitions that the cartel can buy. I have seen actual video footage of the armor that they wear, the armored vehicles that they have, the weapons that they have. They're ruthless. And so it would take nothing for these cartel members to start pushing through the border. There's nobody at the border in Arizona. You know, the border agents are all processing people. So Lukeville, where all these people are coming over, in Texas, where all the hot spots are, there's no border patrol around really, and we're on our own. And so they know that they could just come up through there and start a firefight, just like they did in Israel. You know, the Palestinians take us off guard and fight their way up through there. And with the amount of money they're making, my goodness, that they are more heavily armed than the United States military on a percentage basis with the kind of money that they're making. And they control the Mexican government. So Mayorkas has helped orchestrate that also. But I'm going to go through a little bit, and pardon me, you know, for reading, but like I said, I can't retain all of this in my mind. So the impeachment process against Mayorkas will begin tomorrow on Wednesday, and they're calling it Havoc on the Heartland, how Mayorkas failed leadership, how his failed leadership has impacted states. They've got several different attorney generals from Montana, Wyoming, and a few others that are going to be speaking of how their states have been impacted by these open border policies. Yesterday, he stated, so he was doing an interview on Liberal. No, it was with Brett Baer. And yesterday, he stated proudly that since the end of Title 42, DHS has deported more than 470,000 people, and sat there smiling like it was just something so big to brag about. And it's not something to brag about when you've got totals exceeding 10 million people who've crossed our border in the last 3 years. And 470,000 have been deported. Really? That's something to brag about out of 10 million? Fiscal year 2021, they had 1,734. Fiscal year 2020, over 2.4 million or 2.3, and fiscal year 2023, over 2.4. And in 2023, they had 142,000 deportations out of 2.5 million. And this is something that he's just so proud of. And right now, the big thing on liberal media is that the Republicans aren't working. They're not voting to fix this problem at our border. And Mayorkas continually talks about how this has been a broken immigration system for over 30 years, decades old problem, blah, blah, blah. Well, here's my question to Mayorkas. If that's the case and the laws aren't working, then how did previous administrations keep the numbers way down from what he's experiencing? What law has changed from even Bush and Obama, and then you've got Trump, who enacted a lot of things, and you know, COVID enabled him to do Title 42, but what has changed that there had to have been some sort of change in a bad way that would have allowed Mayorkas and Biden to do what they're doing. You know what I mean? Because otherwise it would be the same as it was in the Obama and the Bush administration. This wouldn't be happening. It's because they're turning a blind eye to this sort of thing. So Biden has submitted to Congress another package that they want, I'm sure at the bidding of Mayorkas, more money to hire Border Patrol agents. This is what they're claiming. More money to hire Border Patrol agents, more money to hire more judges to hear these asylum cases quickly, and more money for detention centers to keep these people in. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You've got this invasion going on. You've got people out living in the streets, even in New York and Chicago and these places where they're experiencing, snow, freezing weather. You've got some of these people, I think it's in Chicago, they've actually got buses that they've brought in, and they're sending the people to the bus terminals. They're putting them on the heated buses and letting them sit on these buses all night as these buses run to keep them warm. They're just running out of space. Instead of building more detention centers, close the borders. Be done with it. We have the right as a sovereign nation to close our borders. Even if there's some loophole that they find in some law or some verbiage in the Constitution that they're going to reinterpret to mean we got to open our borders to everybody, shut them down. How long would a lawsuit take in court? But in the meantime, shut the spigot off. Stop this flow. And this is where this administration has failed the American people unbelievably. So I want to go over his career, because several years ago when Biden took over, there was the Voice Office. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but it was for victims of illegal crime enforcement. And that was a way that angel families could call in on this line, talk to somebody, and we would actually be able to get updates on criminal cases against these illegals who had committed crimes or killed one of our loved ones. And because a lot of times it just gets lost in the system, and the angel families would be calling local or state facilities and not being able to get updates. They weren't keeping track of the fact that when they would be released, that ICE would be there to pick them up immediately and deport them back across the border. And so that hotline actually was a huge help. Trump listened to us, he understood the dilemma, and he created the voice line. Well, when Biden came into office, he switched it over to a helpline that trafficked illegals. If they were the victims of human trafficking, they could call to this number. Well, this number gets hooked up directly. They start a case number there at ICE, and even though they paid to be smuggled into the country, they can say they were a victim of human smuggling, which is ridiculous to me. Then they are sent over to USCIS. And USCIS signs them all up on these programs and immediately gives them work permits to be able to go out and work in this country. So a lot of the things that you're hearing, I made these phone calls, at the time that they took down the Voice Office for the angel families, for the victims of illegal crime. And I dug into this, and it took me 2 days of phone calls to that office at ICE and over to USCIS. And I got to the top guy at USCIS and found out exactly what was going on about them giving them all work permits and whatnot. And as you're going to hear when I talk about Mayorkas's career, he worked at USCIS. And the things that he facilitated during his career, and he knows the system in and out. He has done this by design, folks, is all I'm going to say. With all the research that I've done and everything that I've looked into, there's just no coincidence in all of this. So And of course, his family is Cuban, and they came from Cuba in, I think it was 1959. And they later became citizens, and Mayorkas went to law school, and they lived in Florida for a bit, but ended up over in California. Let me see. Yeah. So in 1985, he became a litigation attorney in private practice in California. So he had graduated from law school and was in private practice as an attorney. In 1989, he was put in the position of assistant U.S. attorney in Central District of California, and he prosecuted white-collar crime. And then he was a coordinator of the Southern California Telemarketing Fraud Task Force, and he aggressively combated telemarketing fraud in Central California. He was doing some good things, when you read into the cases and the things that he was doing. From 1996 to 1998, he was chief of the office's General Crime Section, overseeing training and trial work of all the new assistant U.S. attorneys in the criminal division. Not much that I was able to find out about that period of time, other than his title and what he was doing, as far as his job description. In 1998, Senator Dianne Feinstein recommended to Clinton, and he appointed Mayorkas as the nomination, or he appointed Mayorkas as a U.S. attorney for the Central District of California, becoming the youngest U.S. attorney. Now, previously, he was the assistant U.S. attorney. Now he is the actual U.S. attorney there in Central California. And he did a lot of good then. He, the Mexican Mafia death penalty proceedings, he was involved in all of that. He prosecuted Buford Furrow Jr., who murdered a federal postal worker, and he was involved in a hate-motivated shooting of children in a community center. And he took down the violent 18th Street gang using RICO statutes. So he was doing really, really good in that kind of stuff. But now things start to get a little dicey, in my research about him. In 2000, Mayorkas and many California officials participated in efforts to obtain executive clemency for narcotics trafficker Carlos Vignali Jr., a son of a wealthy LA businessman. Why? If he was already sentenced as a narcotic trafficker. Clinton commuted his 15-year sentence on his last day in office. So Mayorkas was involved in that. A drug trafficker, narcotics trafficker, getting him out of his 15-year sentence. You go forward, he was still in that position. You go forward in 2009, Mayorkas was appointed by Obama as director of USCIS. And this is where he was seeing all of the inner workings of this, seeing what could be done. And I'm sure as a Cuban refugee, was what they were calling him then, but a Cuban illegal, when they came here, him and his family, I'm sure there's still some pressure on him from people in Cuba, from different people, in higher up positions, to do something about allowing more Cubans to come into the country. I'm sure that sort of pressure was going on. Mayorkas is the one who implemented DACA, which is Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals. He implemented that in 60 days when he was in USCIS. United States, I always forget this. Anyway, United States, USCIS Center. USCIS is going to drive me insane now. United States CIS. United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Whew. How could I have forgotten that? All right. So, yeah, he put together DACA in 60 days. He led the U.S. government efforts to rescue orphan children in Haiti. Rescue orphan children in Haiti. Remember, Hillary was Secretary of State at the time. And the whole Haitian, the big thing about her going over there and snatching kids. Who knows what was really going on? He also led the advancement of a crimes victims unit that for the first time resulted in the ability of the agency, USCIS, U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services, to administer the statutory maximum number of visas to victims of crime, which are referred to as U visas. You'll hear that a lot maybe on news things or read about it in articles. U visas. So U visas are used here, and they're talked about when they say that illegals are afraid to come forward and report a crime because they're afraid of being deported. That's a lot of what was being said during the Trump administration because, ICE had a handle on things. Trump was really a advocate about illegal immigration, making sure that it wasn't going on and getting rid of the illegal criminals in our country. So the conservatives would talk a lot about the fact that if an illegal comes forward, and a lot of domestic violence was happening with the illegals because of the cultures that they came from, and the men are allowed to treat women like animals, and so they would beat them and hit them and have fights. And the woman would, the Democrats would always be saying, these women are afraid to come forward because they're afraid that they're going to be deported. And the conservative argument was, no, if they go to law enforcement and tell about this crime that's committed, and if their life is in danger, they can get a U visa and be able to stay in the United States as a victim of crime. Well, this happened back in 2009 when he was at USCIS. So he why would he have been doing this? This wasn't that big of a deal back then. But I don't even think that USCIS should be the one that's administering this. But this is what I'm saying when you have to look at the sequence of events because of what they've created with the victims line and then pushing them right over to USCIS and letting them finish off all of the process when they've got all these little loopholes in place that Mayorkas put into place when he was working at USCIS. So for his work as director of USCIS, Mayorkas received awards. Ready for this? From the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, from the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles, and the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Funds. Why would they be giving him awards for his work and what he was doing at USCIS if it wasn't something that was benefiting illegals / immigrants, as they refer to them? It's pretty obvious things were going in a direction that they probably shouldn't have been. In 2015, a Department of Homeland Security Inspector General report criticized Mayorkas' oversight of the EB-5 investor visa program, which offered lawful permanent resident status, green cards, to foreign investors who invested $500,000 into a business that created jobs in the U.S. And this program greatly increased under Mayorkas. So you invest $500,000 in a business, you employ 1 or 2 people, U.S. citizens, other green card holders, you create some jobs, And now you're given a permanent presence authority, here in the United States. You can see where that would go wrong really fast. And so it was like huge amounts that was happening under Mayorkas at the time, and the Inspector General, brought this forward. The investigation focused on allegations that politically connected businesses were given special treatment. So Mayorkas had communications outside the normal procedures. There was favorable action that deviated from the regulations, and they were fast tracking casino program individuals. And all of these were made over the objection of USCIS analysts who were suspicious of the funds and where they were coming for in the casino program, like, mafia, gang, cartel. They didn't know where this money was coming from, but Mayorkas was fast tracking all of this at the time. In June of 2023, Obama nominated Mayorkas for Deputy Secretary of DHS, and he was confirmed on December 20th, 2014. He led the normalization of U.S.-Cuba relations, and he negotiated U.S.-Cuba travel. This is where I'm saying, you've got your first immigrant in this sort of a position at the Department of Homeland Security. There is going to be some sort of bias or favoritism or push to help the people of their home country. I don't care who you are. It's just going to be in you to do that sort of thing. And I just think it's wrong for us to put this type of an individual in charge of Department of Homeland Security, an immigrant. You need an American citizen who was born here, who has roots here. They will have the interests of the sovereignty of the United States of America more in their hearts and in their mind than an immigrant from another country. Sorry. DHS, so he got put in the position of Deputy Secretary of DHS under Obama. And DHS was on the Government Accountability Report as a high risk list for management challenges. Low morale under Jed Johnson and Mayorkas were cited. So there was low morale then at the time with him as Deputy Secretary of DHS, and you fast forward to today and it's low morale again. Is it because of his policies? Is it because of the way that he viewed things and things that he was demanding that were maybe against the oath that these Border Patrol agents took? There's a whole slew of reasons why low morality could be in place, but it's pretty funny this many years apart that it's the same issue under the same man. Who would want to work for him? I mean, you even look at him sitting in these congressional hearings, and he looks like such an evil man, and he has no problem lying. And I can only imagine with Kat Kamek, in that private meeting with congressional members with Mayorkas, informing him of his impeachment inquiry coming up. I can only imagine how the hair on the back of her neck probably went up when she asked him if it was a threat. He just smiled at her. I've seen that smile many times when he's testifying, and it's evil. It's just evil. He's such a liar. He's so treasonous. Dereliction of duty. Everything that you could say about the most terrible person applies to Mayorkas. And like I said, he has no problem lying. He has no problem lying to the people that he's accountable to in Congress, who will fund what he needs to have done. And he has no problem lying to these people, knowing that every American citizen has the opportunity to watch this. And the Department of Homeland Security Secretary right now, that's the title that he holds now, is lying to us. He has forgotten the actual reason why the Department of Homeland Security was created. And that was after 9/11, to protect the homeland, to, foresee these foreign threats. And if you don't think the open border and the invasion of our country is a foreign threat, then you're an idiot and you shouldn't be the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. Ever. So he was under Obama as Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. Then he went on to practice private law from 2017 to 2020. And now you fast forward to November 23rd of 2020, and Biden announced that at that time that his plan to nominate Mayorkas as the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. His confirmation was the most contested appointment of all Biden's cabinet nominees. I remember watching those hearings and screaming at the TV saying, no, don't go with this guy. And I know Josh Hawley, he was very against this and had a lot of questions. And Mitch McConnell was even kind of against it. I want to go into didn't go into it in this part. So, yeah, as deputy secretary too, it talks about the fact when he was under Obama that a landmark agreement reached in 2015 with the Chinese government reduced for a brief period Chinese cyber attacks against American companies aimed at the theft of intellectual property. And then it went on about the normalization of U.S.-Cuba relations, which I already talked about. But let's see. Unbelievably, he had the support of the Fraternal Order of Police and endorsements from former secretaries. This is for Department of Homeland Security secretary under Biden. Endorsements from former secretaries Tom Ridge, Michael Chertoff, who served under George Bush, and Janet Napolitano, and Jay Johnson, who served under Barack Obama, who said Biden could not have found a more qualified person. Most Senate Republicans, however, opposed the nomination. Josh Hawley delayed a speedy confirmation, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell urged his caucus to vote against the confirmation. Well, he ultimately was confirmed with a 56-43 vote with these shady Republican senators, Shelley Moore Capito, she's a senator from West Virginia, Rob Portman from Ohio, Susan Collins from Maine, Mitt Romney from Utah, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, and Dan Sullivan from Alaska also. They voted with Democrats to confirm Mayorkas. So early in his tenure, arrests surged at the U.S.-Mexican border, and in June of 2021, the monthly number of intercepted migrants reached a decade high of 188,800. That was a decade high in just 1 month. And so that was already starting very, very early, June of 2021. There were already record highs. That was 5 months into the Biden administration. Oh, let's see. Testifying to the Homeland Security Subcommittee of the House Committee on Appropriations on April 27, 2022, Mayorkas confirmed that the Biden administration will implement a disinformation working group in the Department of Homeland Security with the intention to develop guidelines, standards, and guardrails to shape the department's longstanding effort to counter disinformation. Well, 3 weeks later, after critics called the initiative a violation of free speech and its executive director, Nina Jankowski, had resigned, the disinformation working group was paused. Now, again, you got this guy who is in charge of Department of Homeland Security. He's already got a surge at that time, 188,800 in 1 month was considered a surge and unheard of at that time. At our border with the invasion already starting, and of course they're trying to keep the media, information or attention off of it for sure. So of course they create this disinformation working group, which they knew would make everybody go crazy. And so it was paused when there was such an outcry over it. And I really think that they create these sort of crazy notions so that everybody goes crazy and starts going after that. And that's all that's being reported in the news, that our First Amendment violation of free speech is going to be violated with this disinformation working group. And so the focus is taken off of the border. They do this time and time again. Then and in September of 2021 was the long rain incident with the horseback Border Patrol agents, which Mayorkas completely ignored. You know, even the reporter who took those pictures talked, sent information to Mayorkas, says, no, that's not what was happening at all. The photo appears that way, but that's not what was happening. They weren't being whipped. And he didn't care. He went ahead and just annihilated these Border Patrol agents and created a lot of division and hate in the United States about those men and women for unnecessary reasons. But Mayorkas doesn't stop to think about this sort of stuff and the division and trouble that he's causing. And the Heritage Foundation had released emails that showed hours before the press conference, Mayorkas received emails that disprove the whipping claim, including from the photographer himself. So he didn't care. He had all this information before his press. He went ahead and did the press conference, and then, oops, am I bad? That's just bad policy from a Department of Homeland Security secretary. That's unbelievable. They were already raising the prospect of impeaching him back in October of 22. And had many former Trump officials with Border Patrol and ICE condemning Mayorkas' actions at the time. So on October 31st of 2023, Mayorkas testified before the Senate Homeland Security Committee, saying that more than 600,000 people illegally made their way into the United States without being apprehended by Border Patrol during the 2023 fiscal year. Well, when you think about that, and we've had more reliable sources of the numbers coming from the border, and if you've got 2.4 million coming in the fiscal year of 2023, and then we've had record amounts, I think there was over 800,000 in December alone. You've got these record type of numbers. 600,000 without being apprehended is a lie, because he is talking about, they're saying that there's less numbers than what we really know. And they're saying that if people are crossing the border and being apprehended, for every person that's doing that, there's 2 that are going across undetected. And the criminal aspect of these people coming across our border only really makes sense and makes you go, wow, this is happening, when you look at the crime statistics happening in Chicago and in New York and in San Francisco and in LA. But it's really bad in the Chicago area. That's where a lot of these Venezuelan gang members are going. But there's also some really bad people up in the New York area. I guess over on Randall Island, there was a huge fight over the weekend, and a guy was stabbed because he was talking to this woman that another guy was dating there at the shelter. And so he stabbed him with a knife. And as they're interviewing people from the shelter on Randall Island, these illegals are telling the reporters there's gangs in these facilities that they've put up here. And I think they're all just big tents. There's gangs, there's drugs, there's weapons, not just knives, but they're armed with guns. How is this even happening if the Department of Homeland Security is running these detention centers? How do you have drugs and weapons even available or present in these detention centers? If that's the case, then we don't have a very smart Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, and he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Because there's no freaking way that these people should be armed or should have any drugs. They're bringing drugs across with them. These are the undetected people who cross over, have backpacks full of drugs, and end up in these big cities and start selling them to people. So he's not a very good example of somebody who's doing their job. Oh, and I can't wait for tomorrow. And I want any of you who are listening to find out somehow where you can watch this. It'll be on C-SPAN, I'm sure, but I'm sure there'll be YouTube videos and different things out on Rumble and whatnot. But you've got to watch it. Watch his face. When you watch his facial expressions and how he reacts to things, that will help you start learning how to read people when they're lying and when they're just the epitome of evil. I can't stand this man, and I cannot even believe that he's in this position. And I can't even believe that as taxpayers, we are paying him a little over $200,000 a year to be in this position. He doesn't deserve any of that money. And one of the congressional members wanted to bring his salary down to $1 a year until he stepped up and started doing things to protect the borders, which I think would have been a great idea, wouldn't it? When you can't afford your mortgage payment and things that are happening, then I guess you're going to step up and do the job that you were hired to do. So the other things about, just to put this in a summary, Mayorkas lies to Congress every time he's there. He's lying to them. And I've talked to several congressional members, and they said it's just unbelievable. And it's so frustrating because when they ask him a question, he always wants to come up with an excuse. He can never answer yes, no. He just never can answer the questions. And when they talk about statistics or numbers or percentages from him, the answer is always, I'll have to get back to you with that. When he knows full well what he's going to Congress to testify about, but he never goes prepared. You can't have those kind of numbers and the failures that he's creating go public at a Senate hearing. He's got to buy himself some time. He's got to figure out how to cover up. And this is what he does best. He wants more money to fund the problem. As I was saying, the Biden administration has put this bill before Congress, and there's a Republican group that is saying we are not going to fund any more of this problem until you agree to secure the border. And that's exactly what needs to happen. These people need to hold tight. They cannot cave under pressure. They've got to keep these funds from going to the Biden administration because, in essence, folks, if these congressional members cave and they know exactly what's happening at the border, then they are complicit in human smuggling and human trafficking and sex trafficking also. If they're willing to give American taxpayer money to these corrupt players to continue this operation at our border, then those congressional members are just as guilty as they are. They know what's going on. They've been down there. They've seen it with their own eyes. The Republicans, the conservatives have. Democrats tend to stay away from that sort of thing. You've got a couple Democrats that are coming around to the idea. They're more agreeable to impeach Mayorkas than they are to impeach Biden. So the Republicans are going to move forward with doing this. The big question I have in my mind is, what does Mayorkas know? And why would he make a statement, you're not going to like who comes next, to congressional members? That really needs to be it needs to get to the bottom of that. He continually blames Congress for his refusal to uphold his oath. He's not upholding his oath, dereliction of duty, and yet he blames Congress for decades-long broken immigration system, and they haven't done anything about it. Like I said earlier, the laws that are in place and the Constitution, how it's written about our borders and our sovereignty, we have everything in place that we need to. Otherwise, previous administrations would not have been able to keep these people out. Take responsibility for facilitating this, Mayorkas. Take responsibility for the problems that you've caused. Over 80% of those apprehended are released into the U.S. And so this was a big question too. He was meeting with Border Patrol and some people down in Texas, and he had been on a TV interview, and I think it was on a liberal station. Maybe it was the one on Fox with Brett Baer, but he was questioned about of the amount of people that are coming to the border, how many of those are being released into the United States? And he said 70%. Within days, when he was down in Texas, he confirmed behind closed doors with the Border Patrol agents when they questioned him, and he said, well, it's more like 80%. So 80% of the 10 million that is predicted of what's come over the border in the last 3 years is 8 million people. But I guarantee you that that percentage is more like 99.9% of what he is allowing to come into the United States. Otherwise, there would not be the problems that there are, the lack of housing, the lack of food, the lack of, these people are showing up in these communities, folks. And according to them, these people aren't being allowed to work, which I know different from USCIS and the conversations that I have with them. And as long as they're facilitating and using that illegal immigration, human trafficking hotline, there's going to be success for them and they're going to have a work permit. I don't know how many of these people know about this, but then you've got the illegals in New York City outside of these hotels that have all those motorbikes lined up. A lot of them don't have tags or license plate on them. They're not registered. There's no registration on them. Where did they come from? How did these illegals buy them? How do they have them? And then they're using them to deliver food, like for Uber Eats and whatnot. And I found out that there's Uber Eats delivery people who have huge accounts and take all of these deliveries, and they filter them down to these people living at the hotels. So they get on their motorbikes and go and deliver the food. And then the actual person who accepted those deliveries gets a percentage of all the deliveries that he's passed on down to these illegals to go make. So now you've got people taking advantage of these people and making money as they're sitting in the comfort of their heated homes and paying these people, who knows, probably less than 50% of the delivery fee to go out and do their work because they don't want to leave their warm home. So now you got a whole nother layer of people, taking advantage of these illegals that are coming into our country. So it's greed when you stop and think about it all. And quite honestly, is there aspects of human slavery? I think so. But the other thing I read, another article I want to mention in New York was across from this one hotel, there was like a federal grasslands area, and it clearly said on it, no parking. They showed some pictures of it. And there was some very, very expensive vehicles parked out in this area. And so they had tow trucks come. I think there was 3 of them. Tow trucks come to start towing them out of there. And you had these illegals running out of the hotels. One of the vehicles was registered in Florida. And you had a lot of the residents in these areas where these hotels are being filled with these illegals and crimes are being committed and mayhem in their neighborhoods come out and say, how are they affording these vehicles? Where are they getting the money to pay for these vehicles? The gas to go in them. Are they insured? What if they're driving around on our streets and they can't, read street signs and know the traffic laws and driving around and they kill an American citizen? What's going to happen if they're not insured? There's a million questions that go along with this sort of thing that people don't take the time to think through. The disasters of illegal immigration, the disasters of a facilitated invasion, and the disaster of human and sex trafficking that Mayorkas is gleefully participating in. as he smugly sits there and smiles at congressional members, talking to him about being impeached. And he said, "You're not going to like who comes next." I hope he's questioned about that at this impeachment inquiry so that we know exactly what he means. So you look at the history of this man and where he's come from, what he's done. He's learned the ropes of the immigration process. You know, being over in California, I'm sure he dealt with a lot of illegal criminals over there. And then you've got the fact that he was at USCIS, United States Citizen and Immigration Services, learned the ins and outs there, was Deputy Secretary of DHS under Obama, learned the ropes about DHS there, and then went into private practice for how many years was it? It was from 2017 to after the deputy. Private practice from 2017 to 2020. So 3 years he was in private practice. And, this whole plan, 2020 election anyway, and how it was rigged and how they manipulated machines and did what they did. They knew Biden was going to be president, and they probably had given Mayorkas a heads up that he was going to be nominated for the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. So how much planning in those 3 years did he have in between? Did he have to get things in order, to follow the world order rules, to follow the United Nations immigration policies, migration policies, everything that they've got planned? This planet is in movement. Europe, how they've been overtaken, how parts of Germany and France and Germany, France, and what's the other one? Some parts of Italy, even, with all those people that come across the Mediterranean Sea from Africa. But this is by design, folks. This isn't something natural. And you've got the White House spokesperson saying this is the ebbs and flows of immigration. No, you moron. There's never been this amount of people coming over our southern border like this from this many countries. And it's all fighting age men. I would venture to guess women and children at this point are probably under a 20% part of the people coming over the border now. In Lukeville, Arizona, when they're down there filming, it's just men. And Ben Berkman was over there in Texas filming all these buses arriving at these facilities, and it's just all men, fighting age men. Ben Berkman talked to an Afghan or a Middle Eastern man, I can't remember what country he was from, but he was pointing around and saying, these are all fighting age men. There's a lot of men here from China. There's a criminal that he encountered and talked to. I think he was Iranian, and he had come to the United States, and when he got apprehended by Border Patrol, gave him a completely different name. The guy ended up calling Ben and giving him more information. So Ben was calling DHS to give them the information on this guy. He had a 20-second video, so he clearly had his face, and he called in. He had this all taped, and I actually watched him on hold and waiting for DHS to answer, and then talking to them, and they were saying to him, this is a tip, a hotline. Well, what's the guy's first and last name? I only have his first name, but it's a wrong name because this is really his real name. I've got a 20-second video that I can send you. Don't you guys have facial recognition? Well, this is just a tip line. Do you know his date of birth? Do you know his address? I mean, what stupid questions do these people ask? Finally, I mean, it was frustrating to watch this video, but finally, Ben was able to get a hold of some congressional member who took the information and said that he will pass it on to the right authorities. But how good is our Department of Homeland Security when you're calling in as a citizen with a foreign threat that you're fully aware is a foreign threat and is present in our country, and they give you nothing but trouble as they're interviewing you? What's their first and last name? What's their date of birth? Where do they live? Shit, Department of Homeland Security doesn't know any of this information about 100% of the people they let over our border. How is a reporter going to know that? It's amazing what he has done to this country. So again, I'm going to encourage all of you to watch Mayorkas impeachment inquiry starting tomorrow. Tomorrow's guest is going to be Virginia Krieger, and she is the founder of Lost Voices of Fentanyl. And we're going to talk to her about how open borders has ruined the lives of so many Americans. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.